Dr. Cherno, my brother, my mentor, the floor is yours. Can you take us through the dynamics of settlement pattern from linguistic and geospatial environment? Interesting topic. Can you take us through that?
Express my delight to join you again. I hope that this time my internet would work very well for us to be able to get these things done. I have a presentation, so I'm going to look at the possibilities of uploading my slides, if that's possible, and then have my presentation done, because apparently it's the only way I could be able to adequately provide my presentation in quite a convenient way. So I'm uploading my slides. If they appear, please do inform me. Now, probably to give you a background, I'm supposed to give you an idea, a kind of context of how we have evolved as a nation with our different ethnic groups. I will give you a little synopsis of our history. And I think it is, as a form of introduction, it is important to note that we have never created our own country. It was created for us. As a result, what has happened is that we have been boxed together in a space which is called the colonial space, created by the colonial masters. And that space now came to develop to become Senegal, to become Gambia, Mali, Mauritania, etc. Before that space, we have been evolving as a people, in small kingdoms, in small empires, and these ones have always been dominated by a particular ethnic group. To give you an example, before the advent of some of the small kingdoms in what we will call today the region of the Gambia, there was this Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, the Ghana Empire. Some of these empires, we read them in our history books. And if you notice that most of them had what we call a predominant language. The Mali Empire, for example, it was predominant Malinke. And then you have the Songhai, which is predominant Sarahule, if you will call them today that language, but they have evolved into a different people. And the Malinke also have evolved. Today we have them as Bambara in Mali, as Mende in Sierra Leone, as Mandinka in the Gambia here, maybe a little outside, as Mandeng in Senegal and Guinea-Bissau, etc. So they have evolved. And as they have evolved, when the empire broke up, it also created smaller kingdoms. You had the Kingdom of Kabu, for example, which was based in Ngabu, today called Ngabu in Guinea-Bissau. You had the Nyomi Empire, if coming back to the Gambia, which is also found in the Gambia. And then you have our own, how do you call it? You have our own. I don't know whether it's possible to do my presentation. I've already uploaded. Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. Yes, it is. It is. We can see it. We can see the slides.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, very good. Can everybody see that? Okay, very good. So we have all these empires that has grown, eventually into what you will probably call today small nations. So the Nyomi Empire, the Kombo Empire, and anybody who knows the history will know that the Kombo Empire was, Tumani Bojang was the king at the time, and he was a kingdom rather. He was then the king of Kombo, and he was the one who sold Bathos, which was an abandoned island to to the people. So if you look at this slide, for example, you notice that some of these small kingdoms have grown. Kabu, you have Wuli, you have Salum, you have Kayor, Bawol, Jolof, Bundu, and all these ones I emphasize had predominant languages on them. You notice the Malinke, you see that the Jola were on the estuaries here at the outskirts in the Casamas today. You have the Malinke in the interior. You have the Serer around the scene, and then you have the Wolof right up there between Kayor, Jolof, and Bawol, and you have the Fulani, in the Futa Jalong here, the Fulde, and then right up there where you have the Bundu, you have the Malinke in the Khaso and Solinke. So yes, these languages were evolving within their own communities. But then naturally what happened, as we all know, is that, with time, the colonial masters came and then destabilized these small kingdoms and then created their own people. And Gambia now ended up becoming Gambia as you find it. And I used to tell people that it's a very funny way of getting Gambia, because the British hated the country at some point and really wanted to give it away to the French. And they proposed to the French that they wanted to give it to the French in exchange of Gabon. This was in around the 1870s. But unfortunately, the Banjul, which was now a new settlement, different from the other places that have been there for centuries, the new settlement of that island of Banjul, which was just established in 1822, 1823, now became a very prominent place and the center of the colonial administration. As a result, they began to protest because they have these British merchants who came to settle, started having their families there. You have this Aku community who came from Sierra Leone and started settling there and then started building their families. And you also have those slaves, Wolof slaves, who have been brought from St. Louis and Gore and who have been converted into Christianity. And then you have them here. These are the Njais, the Jews, etc., of the time who have carried Christian names. And these people now protested vehemently through a petition to the British colonial secretary, who eventually agreed to retain Gambia, which was a much bigger space than it is today, but decided to trace the line now of the boundaries only across the river, which was their key interest at the time. So this is why you find this peculiar Gambia being traced, across the river, meandering from Farafenye going forward up to Koina, as you will call it, and then making the Gambia the shape it is today in the midst of another country, which is Senegal. Now, Gambia today has a population of about 2 million. To just give you a synopsis of that, the main religion here, as is established by statistics, is 95.7, and Christians constitute 4.2. This might not be an exact statistics, because until the census again is conducted this year or later or next year, we will still have to probably be peddling with inaccurate data. But we know also that the main languages, apart from the English language, which is the official language, is Mandinka, Wolof, Fula, and other indigenous languages. I would have loved to be presenting this language in Wolof or in Pular. The Bambara, you have the Manjago, you have the Kirio, who are the Aku, and the Oku Marabu. Yeah, I can hear you. So you have these people who are there, and many others who are probably not mentioned here, who have been considered as potential decent languages that could go extinct very soon. We had this conference of the Writers Association recently, and then we were talking about these languages that would go extinct soon. But if you look at the diagram now, you will see that Mandinka, who Jahankas are considered as part of the Mandinka anyway, they have all been boxed together and then considered to be 33.8%. Now, as I said, I insist, this is a 2013 census. It is almost 10 years now since, and the demography has changed considerably. And then the Fulani, the Tukulor, the Lorobo are put together. They are all Fulas, and then you have the Wolof, etc., and the others that follow. Now, if you look at the urban-rural, the way we have been, distributed in population-wise, you realize that the urban is already much bigger than the rural. We are about 61.3% settling in the urban area, and then 38.7%. And this, naturally, as we all know, is caused mainly by the rural-urban drift as a result of mostly economic reasons, either by people who are finding it difficult to survive because of their poor farming habits or maybe lack of other jobs, and therefore they move to the urban area where they find the potential opportunities of getting into other small businesses, so that they can survive. Others also will come for education, to learn. So as a result, when they move over to the urban area, once they finish school, it's very difficult for them to go back. They would like to find a job there and then settle. And the other reason is that eventually, what it is causing also is that people who are living in the rural area are bringing their goods to sell. And once they bring their goods to sell, they find it difficult to go back. So, as I said, it's economic and educational. Now, looking at the population distribution now by LGA, at 2013, as I said, it indicated that, Banjul and Kanifing up to Brikama, that is the West Coast region, and the Greater Banjul, carries practically almost half of the population. And then you have the rest of the distribution for the rest of the country. And then if you look at it by male and female, you realize that practically most of the female continue to remain, likely in the rural area, while the male are likely in the urban setting. This can be understood mainly because the women are the ones who stay and take care of the families, while the male go out to the urban area looking for jobs and other means of survival. Then you look at the ethnic distribution by region, and I have to say this is not entirely accurate, but it has been just felt around by looking at the predominant languages. I am very happy that Amie mentioned about education here, because I quickly give you just a synopsis of it. But look at it. You already have in the URR two predominant ethnic groups, that is Sarahule and the Fula. In the CRR North, which is the side of the other side, that is North Bank, you have the Fana who are predominant. And then you all have CRR South, the Fula, the Fana, and the Mandinka are also predominant. But then it depends on the zones that you go into. Like if you look at the CRR South, between Bansang up to Birkama Ba, you find it's predominantly Fula. But beyond Birkama Ba, you start entering into the Mandinka zones, and this is all because of the settlements. And then if you go to the LRR, you go beyond Pakaliba and you enter here, then you start noticing how Mandinka is predominant. But then you find also pockets of villages that are predominant Fula, like Dongoroba and the other places. But predominantly is Mandinka. And then you get to the NBR, naturally predominantly also Mandinka, because you get from Farafenye going up to Kerawan, even going up to the Nyomis, you have predominantly Mandinka. But you cannot ignore the fact that there are pockets of Wolof communities, like in the Fula communities, like the Kuntaya, the Sare Mamas, and the other, where the Fulas have migrated and then settled there and then grew in numbers. You get to the West Coast region, predominantly Mandinka, Gunjur, Sanyang, Birkama, and a host of other countries that are satellite countries there, they are predominantly Mandinka. But once you enter into what we call the hub of the urban center, which is KMC and BCC, you have a melting pot because everybody is around. So it's very difficult to tell you which one is predominant. You can find areas where you can speak Mandinka, like in Bakau. You can find on other areas which is predominantly Wolof within Serekunda, and others which are predominantly Fula within Serekunda, like in the Sinchus and the Welingaras. And then the same thing will happen for the Wolofs and the other Jolas and others. But then I didn't mention that in the West Coast region also you have a pocket that is predominantly Jola, which is the Fonyi. So it will be difficult to say practically that this is a particular area where the language is only one language that they are speaking. So that's why we have to consider them as predominant. Predominant in the sense that if we were to go by language policy, and we have to, and there I admit also all the challenges mentioned by my sister Amie. If we were to introduce national languages, we have to regionalize them first. And if we are going to do that, we'll have to look at the predominant language. Certainly, if you go to the URR, certain areas of the URR, people speak more Sarahule than any other language. So naturally, even the Wolofs and Fulas who settle there, they all speak Sarahule. So if you are teaching a language and use that as a language of instruction for schools, you have to use Sarahule. Everybody will speak Sarahule. But then if you get further down here, outside Bakadaji and coming over, towards Bansang, you start entering into a zone which is predominantly Fula. In that case, also, you will have to probably use Fula as a language of instruction. This is just to give you an example. If you go to the Fana area in Panchang, Njau, up to Balangar, you will have to use Wolof or the Fana as a language of instruction, because predominantly almost everybody can speak that language. So this is when there is a language policy in that context. Now, if you go further down, you realize also that there are other issues that need to be put into consideration. First of all, if you look at this, the distribution of our schools, because this is important to link these two, both the demography and the schools, you realize that in the past, most of the high schools were found in the urban area, except for probably Amite High School, which started in 1927, and then later joined by Basse Nasir in 1983, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and then later Tahir in 1988. So these are the schools that began to form up as high schools in the rural area. And then later, when we changed in language, the education policies, then we started having what you will call today the secondary schools and what we call the 9-year basic cycle education. And naturally, the secondary schools started growing. So we have about 220 something secondary schools across the distance. My slides seem to be getting stuck now. I'm unable to make them appear, but at least I will continue because I already know what I'm talking about. So then you have all these secondary schools distributed around the country. So you will see that with this distribution, what it has now created is that you started having large number of students graduating from these senior secondary schools. And then they are also coming out, and what has happened in the past, as the policy would require, is that people needed to be educated, in a particular, in a particular language as language of instruction. So when that policy started, they piloted it, I think about 15 years back. And the success rate was high because all those schools where they were using the language, local language as language of instruction from grade 1 to 3, they had high success rates among the children when who were learning other concepts, science, geography, history, and a host of other things. Then they decided in the language policy, for which I was part of the architects, because I was permanent secretary of higher education, was that from grade 3, we are now going to introduce national languages. But as Amie said, because of the complexity of its nature, we are going to regionalize it. So that in every region where there is a predominant language, we use that language as language of instruction. However, we need to develop at least we start developing 5 major languages into how to read and write them, so that everybody will have access to learning those languages. And then eventually, we also look at the minority languages and also develop them, and then how to read and write. In fact, this is why I initiated as the president of the Right Association under the presidency of Nana Gray Johnson when I was Secretary General, the publication of a book funded by UNESCO called Proverbs in Mandinka, Wolof, and Pular. And then we wanted to do also Jola, Manjag, and Serer, so that gradually we'll grasp all the essence of our language. Today, if any one of us speak any of our languages, there is no way we can really speak a language without having all the interference of the other local languages, or English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Arabic. It's very, very rare because these people have influenced our language. And also because we have been moving, migrating into the urban area where they say what we call a melting pot of languages. But most significantly is because we have never had the idea of preserving our national languages, documenting them, so that people will learn what we call the original language, and therefore this became a big challenge. So just to conclude quickly, we have, for example, the language policy issue. We don't have one now. We have been struggling to have one. It's part of our general education policy. We don't have it. We don't have any data, as I mentioned earlier, on the regional distribution of national languages. And there's a danger of minority languages disappearing. The Bainunka, the Aku Krio, the Karoninka, the Okumarabu, to name a few. They might disappear either through intermarriage or through the shrinking numbers that are eventually dying, and then because people are not speaking them now, they're either speaking English in their homes or maybe another language, is Wolof or any other. It's because of the influence of their settlements. So this is where I will stop, and I'm sure there's a lot to share today, but I don't want to be, abuse the privilege I've been offered, but I thank you very much, and I hope when questions come, we will be able to answer.